Well, here we are back again, another Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast. We have Darren Hart here today. Always, always excited to meet another video person. I do audio, video stuff as well. Good. And then obviously he works with the Rainiers as well. So a fellow baseball fan. We have opening day here coming up. Excited for that. My Kraken have just
Yeah.
completely fallen off. So now I really need something to kind of get into here. Darren, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's nice to meet you, Reed. I'm feeling the same, cracking, falling off, but I'm excited for the baseball season to start. It's a
Yeah.
busy time of year for me, but I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, what's kind of your elevator pitch? What do you do? Because I know your hands are in kind of a lot of stuff, and we can get into specifics here. But kind of what's your elevator pitch?
So I used to be the DJ with the Rainiers, but there's several of us. They started putting me on cameras as well to keep me around, and I fell in love with it. I took photography in school as well, so they kind of trusted me on these cameras, and I fell in love with doing the camera work. And a couple of the guys there do weddings and events. One of them's a DJ, but he also has a photo booth, and he said, "Hey, you should do these wedding events with me." And so we started doing that together, and that's how I got into this stuff. And I fell in love with it because just like the Rainiers, I like being a part of events that are a lot bigger than me, and just being a piece of something that's special, that's more important than I am.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, it's I just because people always ask me too, like, "Oh, do you want to do more corporate?" I'm like, I really like the couples and kind of engaging
Mhm.
with all of that stuff and being a
Yeah.
part of that. So I'll pull up your site here. We'll get into kind of your background and stuff. But what do you like to specialize in? What do you like to do? I know you said weddings and things like that.
Yeah, I love doing weddings because I just fell in love with working with couples. This couple right here, Mason and Rachel, actually, perfect example of a couple that just made me kind of fall in love with doing these weddings. And it actually started with engagement photo shoots, and that's what made it special at first. And then I did my first wedding, and it was chaotic in a good way, in the ways that a wedding is and can be. And I actually love that, and I thrive in that environment, being coming from a live broadcast background where things are changing constantly. I kind of fit right into that, and I feel like I got lucky with some of the couples super early on. I know a lot of people probably say that you know to butter up their couples, but I feel like I got really lucky with some of the people early on and got some really good photo shoots in. I did some free engagement photo shoots to start out, which I'd recommend to any photographer getting started. Just put yourself out there, do a couple uh, styled photo shoots, even if you're not choosing the style. But there's plenty of couples that can't afford the engagement part of their photo shoot that are willing to do a styled shoot. That really got me off the ground.
Yeah, it's hard. Starting out, and I remember back. I mean, it's been years ago now, but it's hard to kind of sell what you don't have or sell. You're like, okay, well, I have this, but can you visualize that or whatever? So getting your hands in there. So how did you get started in all this? I know you said you're from the Bay Area. We're talking off. You're in Tacoma now,
Mhm.
Gig Harbor area, but kind of walk us through your journey of how you got here.
So growing up in the Bay Area, I was really into photography, and I was one of those kids that I always wanted to buy a camera with the leftover money that I had. My dad was like, maybe you should save your money. And eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm getting a camera. I just did it anyways. Made him mad, but now I'm working on cameras at a stadium, so it kind of worked out well. I moved up to the Bay Area, or up to Washington and the Seattle Tacoma area, just because I love it up here. It's beautiful. I know California can be photogenic, but it got crazy down there with all the fires and all the stuff going on. And I wanted to be close to my family. Moved up here, continued taking photos for an Instagram page for Gig Harbor, Washington, and that's kind of why the Rainiers decided, all right, we'll trust him with a camera. We know he knows his way around a camera a little bit, and I couldn't believe they're like, all right, we're going to put him on this beautiful broadcast camera. I was a little timid at first. Just working with that expensive equipment you're not used to working with, but it really got me the skills and knowledge that I needed to jump into wedding photography, because that can be a really fast-paced environment. But I moved up here to be with family. It ended up turning into a photography journey, just wanting to take pictures of everything up here, Mount Rainier, and being close to the Narrows Bridge, and it's just beautiful views everywhere. Um, and I've been doing it ever since. I've spent the last now 4 years doing the same thing and absolutely loving it.
What was it like, kind of breaking in up here, kind of entering the market? I know that we have a lot of this, and we network with a lot of different people that have been doing this forever, been doing this a couple years, and just starting out. Like, what for you? What was your experience, kind of breaking in, especially the South Sound there on the wedding network?
It's just community involvement. It was actually that Gig Harbor Instagram page that I was mentioning, getting involved with that and really getting involved with the community and volunteering my time at first, taking pictures for local businesses that didn't otherwise have the means and digital marketing to put themselves out there. And this page at first was all volunteer work. It still is. It's still a donation based page. Um, there's no monetization from it outside of that, but it was just getting involved in the community. It did so much, meeting people and doing right by people in the community and getting involved in that way. I actually met some great wedding photographers in the process. There's some great ones in the area, in the Gig Harbor area. And I'm sure maybe you'd love to chat with. I would love to chat with you. I might be able to send a couple your way.
That's good. Yeah, hopefully, maybe we know them already. In terms of kind of couples, things you're looking for, what do you look for? What's kind of your target couple that you want to photograph?
You know, it's so diverse up here that as much as I want to pin myself to one type of couple, you end up with a little bit of everything, and you have to be prepared for it. I do like couples that know what they want. There's a certain level of direction with poses and whatnot, but I'm definitely the candid documentary style with maybe 30% thrown in posed stuff. And I love to have a second photographer with me, to especially someone with a little bit of leadership values, where then I can direct them on what I need to do. Couples wise, like I said, I feel like I've gotten so lucky with the couples that I've had, um, that I don't have a particular style of couple that I necessarily, as long as they're comfortable. But that's part of my job, is to make them comfortable.
Yeah,
As long as they can laugh and have a good time. Those are the couples that I like. If they can laugh and have a good time, and be lighthearted, then that's who I want to work with for the most part.
Yeah, do you find in terms of, because we always talk about this, and people hiring their vendors, and especially photo video, and not necessarily realizing like we're going to be here all day together, right? The
Yeah.
personalities and everything really need to mesh. Do you feel like coming into situations like that and getting couples comfortable and familiar with your process? Do you feel
Mhm.
like you excel at that, or kind of how do you go through that during the day?
Well, the earlier in the process that we can get together, I find the better. Like I have one guy that I'm meeting with later today that we're going all the way through, starting with his proposal. I won't say too much about that, just by the off chance that his soon to be wife watches. Great couple. We're going all the way through the proposal process. I love doing that. That's something that I didn't jump until halfway through. Um, but couples that get get stuff done early and take care of it, the longer that we have to plan, the better. I, I love the planning process with couples and getting to know their family and all the little things that are important to them. That's probably the best part of the job, to be honest.
It's hard. It's a hard balance, especially as wedding vendors, and doing the actual photography or video, or if you're a florist or whatever.
Mhm.
Such a small percentage, kind of what you do throughout the day anyway, or kind of throughout the week. But you find that I guess I'm kind of on that similar train now. I've gotten rid of a lot of my seconds, and it's mostly just me, and gotten rid of the other teams over the years, and
Yeah.
being able to have more of that personalized connection. I guess, like going back and forth, and getting that text from the couple, like, oh, hey,
Mhm.
did you get our check? What's going on? And just feeling like you're really a part of their journey throughout, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, it is. That's why I'm really excited for a few of these, proposal ones. They're really exciting to me, because you go all the way through the process with them, and it not only feels good, but by the time the wedding comes up, you feel so much closer and more connected to the family and the couple that are involved, having been there through the process. So I do always appreciate wedding photographers that throw the engagement photo shoot kind of into their package as a standard. Like, hey, this is something I want to do with almost all of my couples. If they really don't want an engagement shoot, we'll figure something out. But I like the idea of having an engagement shoot in there, because getting to know the couples early is really nice.
Things you learned kind of through the process of starting a photography company and kind of building that out, lessons maybe that you've learned that you would like to impart on other people that are kind of getting ready to delve into this.
Yeah, it's really to put yourself out there. I think a lot of people have imposter syndrome where they think they're not good enough to charge for a wedding or to put themselves out there in that way. And part of what a lot of photographers, I got this advice early on from someone, because I had someone experience with me, and I was lucky to have that, was that it, at the end of the day, is a luxury item. Photography at a wedding, you are providing a relative luxury service, because a lot of people will try to take their own photos at their weddings because iPhones are so nice these days and all of that. You do have to a certain extent, promote yourself as, that type of business, because that's what people are looking for if they're looking for a wedding photographer. And to get past that imposter syndrome effect, where it's like, one first step, obviously, work on your skills and work on your camera work and understanding how all the camera settings work. That's obviously the first thing. But after that is to get past that I'm not good enough. I think I'm seeing that a lot recently, especially. I've
It's
seen it a lot.
It's interesting. I had a wedding last week here, and it was a lot of DIY, right? I mean, this was a nice venue, right? A lot of DIY, but they spent money, on a videographer and then obviously on a
Mhm.
photographer. And what struck me was it just how, and I know this is one of my friends, but just how kind of elevated that was the experience for the day, because you
Mhm.
had a couple of like, it's amazing how even if you have a wedding that maybe isn't, some big $80,000 planned, and we were spending 2 years kind of doing all this, but
Yeah.
just a smaller, medium-sized wedding with a high class photographer, and there can elevate how all of that looks, right? And even just paying
Yes.
attention to things in the background and kind of all that stuff, but posing and using flutter and light just really struck me, because I think you could have brought in a bunch of different photo video teams, and it would have been
Mhm.
maybe looked a
Yeah.
little different. Than, hey,
Yeah.
this is, let's spend money here. If we're saving money on maybe the catering and the desserts or whatever, let's
Yep.
spend money here, and at least have that be one of our more expensive items, but then that's going to come out looking a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and part of what a photographer has to decide is do you want to deal with couples that are uh, prioritizing photography? Because you can price yourself into that market if you want, but that's up to you. But there are couples that really prioritize photography, and that's elopements are becoming more and more popular these days. And a lot of photographers are becoming ordained and making it a one package deal and doing elopements, and they're going out there with a ordained photographer and a couple family members, and that's about it. My best friend just got married, and that's exactly what they did.
That's interesting. I'm 50-50 on the elopements. I really thought coming
Yeah.
out of COVID, I thought that was going to be a lot more leaned into, right?
Mhm.
And we had so many of these, like, okay, and we were doing streams and we were doing, ceremonies and then receptions later, or elopements or all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I really thought, oh, this is going to be the new normal. And we were doing a wedding podcast at the time, talking about wedding planning and micro weddings and
Mhm.
kind of all that stuff. And then, at least in my experience, and please feel free, share yours, but like, it seemed like the second we could do big weddings again, it was like, that's what we're doing. Like, we're done with the elopements, but that's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad to see that the elopements are still taking place.
Well, I'm seeing them grow maybe in my friend base, but I was actually interested to hear your perspective on that and other photographers' perspective on that, because I've seen a lot on the internet about elopements, but my personal experience is that that's not where the work is necessarily coming, and it's not as frequent. But I do have a lot of friends that are doing it. I have seen it a lot on the Facebook groups, people looking for elopement photographers, but it's not most of the work I'm doing. That's for sure.
It's right. I think there's some photographers I know that like super niche
Yeah.
in that, really like
Yeah.
high end elopements. And I think that's
Yeah.
right. But I was just surprised because like we did so many in odd shape sizes and everything, kind of through 21, 2020 and 2021 and two. And
Mhm.
I remember even last year, I think it was one of the last weddings we had of the season, and it was a family wedding, barn wedding. It was at their property, but I'm sitting there on the dance floor and there's all these people. I'm like, this is crazy how 2 years ago,
Yeah.
this would have been so a faux pas or not. And it's just totally normal again. But it felt like, I guess it speaks to kind of the human condition of wanting to celebrate and be together. Cause it was like
Yep.
the second we can do that, everyone, cause people were wondering, is that ever going to happen again?
Yeah.
Are people going to feel normal?
Well, and that's who we are as a species. We like to get into to our groups and be with our people, and weddings are definitely a good way to do that. I think people think about elopements a lot, or a small wedding. I see it so much. We want to have a small wedding, and they just start thinking of all the people that they really want to have at their wedding, and it starts piling up. And that's maybe the more common scenario for me. I have friends that, like, I'm doing an elopement where we have a photographer and our parents and maybe one or two friends, and they end up having 50 people there.
In terms of the kind of the photography stuff, are you self-taught? Pick up, like, I know you said saving money, picking up a camera that way, but how did you kind of come into doing this professionally?
Well, so in community college, which I did before I went to University of Washington, I chose to take photography on the side. I was taking audio and communications, but I chose to take photography, and I was like, man, I'm enjoying this the most. So, and even I was doing it a lot on my off time. So mostly self-taught up until the point where I got to Cheney Stadium and the Tacoma Rainiers, because that built the knowledge. Because you have 20 people around you on a broadcast staff that also went to school for it, that are more educated on camera work than you, and learning from the people around you is probably the most valuable skill you can have in almost any trade or any trait. And I chose to do that. I was like, I just want to be a fly on the wall as much as possible and learn as much as possible from the people around me. And once I got into the stadium and working with all those camera operators and all that, and some of the guys coming from the NFL, and a lot of the guys work for the Kraken, and they're going to be exhausted going into baseball season. I'm just going to be excited and ready, because I do a lot of booking and weddings and digital marketing on the off season, whereas they're still doing sports for the most part.
I'll tell you, the live sport thing is nothing to joke about. We did when I went to Gonzaga, and we got to do the women's basketball games, and
Mhm.
it's a between the load in and setup and kind of everything else. And I think we did some baseball games and stuff there as well for Gonzaga, but it's a lot of work. I mean, long days, and it's just it's a good. I think it's a really kind of death by fire kind of thing where you come in there and you really got to figure out. There's not a lot of room for error or mistake in that world.
No, there's not. And sometimes there's not a ton of planning.
Yeah.
Like right now, we're sitting in a position where last year we broke the all-time attendance record for the minor leagues. And this next year, so the season starts, what, home opener is in 8 days, and we haven't all been together to plan the skits and shows yet. I'm sure most of it's put together, and then I get like about 25-30% creative freedom, and then the rest is written skits that we all kind of put in on and pitch in on over time. But it's a really hectic part of the year for me. There's not a lot of prep in sport. Sometimes you just don't have the time, and it's live production stuff, and that's just how it goes. You always end up with less time than you expect.
But that I think, which and then translating that though to doing weddings and everything else, I think that just being able to work on the fly like that has to be able, that you feel comfortable walking into a
Yeah.
lot of various situations at that point.
Yeah, and that's one thing to prepare for weddings, and it's a good thing to second shoot a wedding first, just to find out if it's for you or not. Um, I mean, people, everyone says the same thing. My friends, when I mention wedding photography, they're like, "Oh, you deal with bridezillas." I'm like, I mean, sometimes yes, and sometimes no, but it is the one day that they have. I mean, that is the person that you're catering towards. That's in a lot of cases the person that that's their day. You're gonna make them happy. But live sports definitely prepared me for that, because what was the thing that my coworker had said to me, he's like, well, if you can follow Ichiro in the dark, no, there's not a lot of brides that are faster than Ichiro. So you can, because he would show up for like spring training stuff and like off season stuff to throw pitches and be running up and down the sideline. And that's exciting to watch. But, but yeah, if you can, there's not a lot of brides that are faster than Ichiro is what he had said. And I was like, oh, that's fun. Okay, I'll try this.
No, I like that. Yeah, if you can follow Israel, that's funny. I think yeah, good, good testing ground. Like I got this. I can get you coming down the aisle, no problem. I got Israel on the sideline, so that's funny.
And I use that line to this day in some of my consultation meetings and whatnot, just because I thought it was hilarious, and I've been using it with other people that I've tried to encourage to move forward with wedding photography. Because I have other coworkers that have joined the team recently that, oh, that's what you do? Maybe I should try that. And I mean, I encourage people to. It's a large market. It's saturated. There's a lot of photographers, and you have to put yourself out there. I think looking at real estate agents and how they promote themselves is a really good. Those are the people that I was working with on the off season a lot before wedding photography, and the way they promote themselves as a human being instead of this is my service. I think no, they're promoting themselves as a person. This is who I am. This is why you want me to be part of your journey and what you're doing. And that's big for weddings because you want the couples to be comfortable with you being with their family on the most special day that they have. So
it's interesting. Yeah, you're talking about the whole Bridezilla thing, and yeah, you always get that question from people that kind of aren't in the industry.
yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, same with you. And I know you said that you've been really lucky with the couples that you've had. Like, I don't know if it's the way I operate or just the cost we are, kind of how we present. But yeah, I never really get that. I always get a lot of couples just really genuinely excited. Right? For a long time, I had one of the main videos on our site had a retainer joke about 30 seconds into the video. And I thought, well, this is a good testing ground. If you can find the humor in the retainer joke in the wedding video, then we're probably on the similar vibe versus kind of getting whatever about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why it's important to also know what you want as a business too, because it's okay to tell a couple that you don't provide the thing that they're looking for. If it's something that you really don't want to do, I would highly suggest choosing not to do it and choosing not to promote yourself as someone that does it, because you're just going to frustrate yourself and end up working with the couples that you don't want to work with. And I know I said that my preference of couples is pretty broad, but I mean, the statement of if they're willing to laugh and have fun with it, and they're, that's probably the couple for me.
It's hard. I had a consult, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now, and it was, it seemed generally, seemed really excited and everything, and it made very clear to me kind of during the consult, and it was one of the wedding people, and then it was one of the parents was on the call, and it was made abundantly clear to me, like, this probably isn't the right fit, or this probably isn't I'm not what they're looking for. And it's really hard in that way to be like, well, it's almost, does everybody better for me just to say, like, I probably don't think this is the right fit, or maybe I just won't follow up as, to try to like, hey, wait, did you make a decision yet? Like, kind of let that go. Cause we're so trained in this world of like, you got to go after everything and don't say no and take everything. You're like, no, I'm actually doing a disservice to me. And then also probably to them and their day. Like, the last thing you want is then you're coming out afterward and someone's upset about it. Like, I certainly don't take anyone's money wanting to make them upset with what the product they get.
Exactly. Well, and I think it's a challenge for people early on because they really want that gig. And especially as it gets more and more competitive, it becomes harder and harder to say no to, to any couple and gig offer, and especially early on when it's intimidating. But I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest. It's a self-control challenge early on, almost. Yeah, you have to be willing to look for the couples that are right for you. And that's why I actually do recommend styled shoots with a few people, and do a couple ones cheap with couples that you really enjoy to find out what those things are that you enjoy. I mean, it's important to know where you actually want to go with your business. Cause if you can put yourself in the market of Bridezillas, if you want to,
Well, it is kind of you, you eat what you sow, kind of a little bit in that way, or kind of what you put out. You were talking about yeah, standing out as a photographer, right? Marketing, kind of that way. And I know you do digital marketing as well, because that's my question. Like, at least for me, it's always been video and like. Some people don't want that, and some people do want that, but at least it's not as saturated, right, as photography is in
Yeah.
terms of like how
Mhm.
do I stand out? You know, it's 1/10 of kind of this what people do.
Yeah.
So how do you, and I know you said putting yourself out there, being confident, but how do you stand out, and what is your advice that way? Because I don't know. I've talked with lots of photographers who are friends over the years, and I say I have no idea how I would do if I was in that situation.
Standing out is absolutely the hardest part, right? I mean, with so many people, um, you can find gigs with reputable places. I mean, you don't necessarily have to pin yourself to wedding photography. Like, well, I do the sports photography, and just the fact that I do work the baseball season with the Rainiers helps me. And I felt fortunate at the start. It did help me get gigs here and there, but just doing right by people and having the good recommendations. I doing what you enjoy doing and not forcing yourself to do what you don't want to do. And
I like your advice too of approaching it more like a real estate person and promoting, promoting the individual and not necessarily the service. I mean, I think that that's a good. You said you have a point.
yeah, I actually did forget to mention that. The your comment of videography, that is an important thing in standing out, even if you're not doing it with a big, you know, expensive Sony broadcasting $25,000 camera. You can use your phone or whatever brand of camera that you're using to make engaging content on the internet. You're going to have to be on social media and making. I highly recommend the reels and all of those things, engaging with that community, um, searching the hashtags that are actually involved with what you're doing, and finding the people that you're trying to reach through social media, because that is huge now. But the digital marketing end of it, and offering, even learning how to use those platforms so that you can offer couples, hey, here's a 60-second even short of your wedding that's really cool. I mean, couples love that kind of stuff, and it doesn't take a ton of work as far as this editing stuff goes to do that kind of stuff. I offer a free, really well edited short plus a like minute and 20-second video, pretty standard with any of my larger packages. And that's a big standout. I've seen plenty of other photographers and videographers do the same thing. But it does help, and it goes a long way.
It's just so hard. It's one of those like, and I get to the point where like you, it's almost like you're doing your vegetables at that point, eating your. Like, you're kind of like, okay, okay, I got a blog here. Okay, I got to post on Instagram. Okay, I got to post on TikTok. Okay, I got to. I mean, to me, I get to the point where I'm like, I'm just like, I've had it with all of it. So how do you like? What's your advice to kind of stay motivated with all of that stuff and making sure that you kind of do your due diligence in that way?
Avoiding running yourself too thin, because that's really, really easy to do with all the different platforms. Um, Choose a couple that you understand and that you're really good at, and lean hard into them. For me, that would be Instagram, because that is closer to my generation. Not quite, still a little bit older than that, but it's closer than TikTok. I just recently started leaning into TikTok, but that's actually on the sports end. I still don't do TikTok much for the wedding photography stuff, although I would recommend it. But this is again the thing: running yourself too thin. It's just something that I'm choosing not to do right now, because I'd be running myself too thin on it. Do the Instagram. Couples love to see that, especially for photography, because it's basically a photo collage. You basically have that's what Instagram is. The 1-to-1 aspect ratio can be annoying, especially since that's the first way people see your photo when they look at your profile. But yeah, leaning heavily into social media, not running yourself too thin on it, because it can get overwhelming with Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Facebook groups are great to get involved with the community, joining your local Facebook groups, um, having, you don't even need to have the biggest Instagram following in the world. You just stay consistent on it and use the hashtags and develop the SEO and all that stuff. Make sure you're using the terms that you want to use to draw in the audience that you want to draw in. But
it's hard. It's like, yeah, like you said, running kind of ragged in that way. I think as long as I look like I'm alive still and in business on all these
yeah,
different things, I think that's also like,
well,
don't do it.
yeah,
Don't do it for 6 months and then drop off for 4 years. Like you got to
yeah,
do at least a little bit.
yeah. Scheduling, scheduling so that you don't run yourself too thin. I struggled with it big time, and early on, and eventually it was just like, you know what, I'm putting a whiteboard right over here. It was more important for me to have the things written down that I knew I had to do tomorrow than it was for today, because at least I knew, with all the crazy amount of things that you could potentially do, a post on this platform, reach out to this couple, and all sorts of things. I'm like, okay, I need to know that these things are for tomorrow, and I can take them out of my brain for today and do the things today that need to get done. Yeah, it's scheduling for social media, which there are programs that, for scheduling social media, and I'd use one if I were any wedding photography, because a wedding photographer or media person, because you get busy, and scheduling your social media stuff can take that load off big time.
That's interesting. Anything else you want to make sure we touch on here? Anything else you want to make sure that we touch on our conversation?
If we had a bunch of wedding photographers in here, I'd ask 100 questions. What is your main source? What do you do? Because you're podcasting, you're running a show, you're doing sports stuff, you're doing wedding stuff. How'd you get into it? I'm sure people of your show have heard that already too, but
okay. No, it's, I think this is a good platform. Just in terms of just at least networking and kind of at the minimum, I think it's hard. I think nowadays, even in the kind of the Pacific Northwest, even we could try to do stuff down to Oregon and Spokane and stuff as well. I think it's hard to kind of get to know other people. And I think even when you're doing, when you're working together at weddings, I don't think you get the same level of familiarity of having the conversation, right? You're mostly together, kind of BSing and shooting the breeze and kind of doing all that stuff. So I think that this is a good way to do that. And then obviously to have people have things to be able to share and kind of free content that way, I think is important. I don't like networking just for networking's sake, right? Like I go to some of the networking groups and stuff, mostly as a videographer, so I can, I'll produce the video for it out of that. I think it's hard to sit there and kind of BS for half an hour and then move on. I like the idea that we can do this and then have something kind of talking about who we are and what we do, while also getting to know each other. I think is a better use of time. So that's always kind of been my thought process behind that.
I completely agree. My University of Washington courses so it was during COVID, and it got turned to a remote course, and they ended up leaving it that way because they actually were able to bring in guests from just all over the world to bring in on the video, sessions for 3 hours. They had a guy, I can't believe I'm blanking out on his name, but he was the head of Motown Records when Barry White was it's like they could not get those kinds of people and make those kinds of connections and relationships when it was like an in-person course where they showed up in person all at the same time. They had students there and then everyone left. Completely different environment, but if they started doing their video stuff, and it's just like, okay, now I'm meeting tons of people from all over the country with different perspectives, and podcasts are getting bigger and bigger as the days go by. For good reason, for exactly the reasons you just mentioned. I think even giant NFL stars like Shannon Sharp are like, no, I'm doing the podcast now. I get to actually have these conversations with people, and you sit down for a few minutes before we start recording, and get while you're setting up the tech stuff and all that, and get to have conversations, and not necessarily put a huge time limit on it. You can edit and post a little bit, but I agree with you. It helps develop those relationships. I think it's cool that you're doing it.
I thought it was interesting that Shannon, I think it was last week or the week before, he was talking about his but because it's like I think the world's biggest sports podcast right now, and his
Yeah.
interview with Cat Williams paid him more than any single year he ever had playing in the NFL, which is
Yep.
pretty remarkable to think about. No, I mean I think COVID was rough, and obviously the Zoomification of it all. But I agree with you, and the idea, and it's the same with this podcast and where I do my football one. You know, I can have the commissioner of the CFL call in and do the show, and you would never be able to coordinate and do something like that, or travel up, or do all this stuff, and just being able to kind of have even just TV shows. And you look at like the Pat McAfee, and like we could have anybody
Yeah.
call in at any time and just to be a part of it, where we were flying people to the show before having to do it in person. Like I think just the normalization of that, I think is really exciting, and I agree, it's totally kind of opened up the world in that way.
Yeah, and it was weird because one of the things that helped me with wedding photography the most was my background early on working in retail and just working with people. It helped a lot, and just dealing with those scenarios. But it's so much so that I'm almost forgetting the point that I was about to make. Working a retail gig and watching the tech change through COVID. Tech made it more readily available for people to do this kind of thing because it became a necessity, and companies like Zoom and even Google and all the audio companies, because I was working heavily in audio at the time, started just mass developing as much as they could geared towards podcasts and everything. It helped a lot. I think it was one of the few good things that came out of COVID, but it definitely made it possible to do things like this.
Well, no, it made it. I think it made it just really approachable to get into it too. And then I know that like YouTube's always kind of been that way of like, well, if you have a phone or you have a device, you can go live or you can publish a video, you can do all that. But I think, there's there's a lot of podcasts now, but it is interesting in that you got to see the ones that keep going and kind of do it that way. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think just the experiment of kind of growing kind of the Pacific Northwest wedding vendor thing. I mean, this certainly isn't done for impressions or revenue. I mean, this is more done for the networking of it all. But I think it's fun. I've got to meet a lot of people that I would never have worked with, or that I get to work with people that I've met on here. It's interesting in that way. It's just it's a more unique way, I think, than going to just like a Wedding Network USA event or whatever.
It absolutely is. And actually one last piece of, and I haven't been in it crazy long. I'm still taking lots of advice. So, and any wedding photographers have advice for me, send it my way, please. I'll take it. Is to actually have some kind of audio setup. Reed, you actually, from an audio tech perspective, you have a great setup. Nicely done. Sounds wonderful. And I appreciate that, but it's really important. And you'd be surprised how long it goes how far it goes with couples when you do a virtual meeting with them, when you have really good sound. And sometimes, not always, I'll set up my nice camera for that just to present as well as I possibly can. But taking the actual consultation process seriously and having maybe work on the setup for that a little bit.
Well, it's hard when you're like, here, I'm going to be doing photo and video for your day. Here, look at my, out of focus camera and all this. I'm like, yes, it's all about the presentation in that way. I don't always, dress or look maybe how it should be to be, but I do also want you to feel like you kind of know who you're getting as well as what you're getting in that process. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times I get for a consultation, I'll block out like a couple hours beforehand. If you put the effort into it, you're going to set up my camera on the tripod over there. I actually probably would have done the same thing today had I not been coming from the stadium and it not being like the week before opening day, which we in this industry, or at least at my work, call well, okay, I'll let you choose whether or not you keep this, but we call it Hell Week just because it's just everything's up in the air. It's chaos. Well, it's the busiest week of the year, but that's what would have happened for today. Is like you're gonna put the effort into the consultation call because it's really important.
Well, Darren, this has been fun getting to know and kind of connecting in this way. If people want to check out your work, where would you have them go?
I would have them go to sendavl.com. So he had it up there. Oh, there you go.
Look at that.
That's the one. And I actually, so a lot of times these days I have some of my other folks from the Tacoma Rainiers, because we have other DJs and camera operators. I'll have them offer DJ services, because a couple of those guys, our whole staff there is amazing, as far as all that stuff goes, and they're amazing to even let us work with each other and use their staff for this kind of stuff on the off season. But I got a guy that's a great DJ that comes out for the send audio stuff, and I went to University of Washington for audio, so I always keep an eye on that myself. And that's one of the things that I try to do at weddings, even as a photographer, is develop a good relationship with the DJ there, because he's going to do other events. But you can find me at sendavl.com. We can either do DJ audio stuff, but my main thing nowadays is photography, because I absolutely love it. And so on the homepage there, you can either click on the photography link or the audio link, whatever you're looking for, or we'll package the two.
That's good. Yeah, you would be amazed at how often the photographers get curmudgeon-y with the DJs at weddings. I always think that's interesting, because I'm always friendly, because I'm like, hey, can I get a backup feed, or can we do this, or how are you doing toast or whatever? But it's always the photographer. They're just like, oh, hey. And I'm like, you like if it is weird, it's weird. Photo DJ is
man. I feel like I'm in such a weird position, having done so much of both, and starting with the audio, because audio is so niche. And one thing's photographer, please be patient with your DJs though. Audio is a very niche thing. If they have something that you don't quite understand, it's hard. Just like you have things that they might not understand, they have things that you might not understand, and it's tough. It's funny being on both ends of it.
Yeah, it's it's interesting, because there's always that way, and I'll see posts of even like photo people complaining about videographers or whatever, and it's like, well, maybe you did stuff that got in their way too, and they're not running on here posting about it. Like, it does, and everybody works both ways here, and I try to be, communicate and not, if I'm in one shot of 5,000 frames that you take during the day, like, I think we'll be okay. I think that'll work out.
And you're gonna be. You're gonna be. You're probably going to be in one. I mean, if they're, especially for the videographers, that's it. Get used to and good at working with videographers. Be good to the other vendors, just like you are the couples. That's like that. It seems like a standard, and it's probably redundant on these kinds of podcasts to say make friends with other vendors, but I don't know if people take that part of it seriously enough, because it's important.
No, I just remember, I think it was like the third wedding I'd ever done, and it was I show up, and I'm like telling the photographer, like, hey, I'm brand new here. Like, if I'm in your way at all, just scream at me. Like, I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out. And we're outside the hotel. We're doing like photos for like an hour. They're walking around, whatever. He comes over. He's like, you said you weren't going to get in the way. I said, well, like what he goes, in this one shot here, I can see your elbow in the corner of it. I'm like, brother, we've been out here for an hour. If I'm in one corner of one shot, like, I think I'm doing all right here. Like, I think
that's pretty solid. I was gonna say I've gotten worse than an elbow in a corner. I think I like that. Oh, so a little off topic. We did have a player at the stadium that had a habit of standing in front of the cameras on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that kinds of stuff.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I won't name the player, because that'll just I might get in trouble for that one. He's gonna come at me in a text message like, "Hey, bud, I'm gonna change my walk-up song every day this year now."
Well, Darren, I appreciate it. Good to meet. I like the Rainiers. We'll have to get down there. Like I said, do a wedding industry. We had. I enjoy the Rainiers, at least just from tracking the Mariners, and we lived through the Mike Ford of it all last year, and that was very exciting. So lots of things that way. I'm sure we can talk more baseball off here. I appreciate it. Website, everything else. Thank you so much. I'll play the outro music, and we'll get out of here. Thanks, man.
Absolutely.